as we look at codependency, we also look at how it works in the family dynamic and codependent parents. Were you parented by a codependent parent?
I just did the survey that on the article that you had me read, and I put, I think so, as opposed to I'm sure.
Did it ask you about if you were parented by a codependent parent or if you were a codependent parent?
Did you have a codependent? That's the article. Do you have a codependent parent? 8 signs to know that you have a codependent parent.
Oh, great lead in. Okay. So we don't have any really great answers for you. We're just going to give you information about codependent parents. We are certainly in the middle of parenting ourselves with our children. That didn't come out right. We're in the middle of parenting our children and trying to sort out the good, the bad, the ugly, and the hopefully joyful.
I have good answers for these people. So I think it's a little codependent of you to say that we don't have good answers, because I have some really good answers.
You are just pushing it tonight, aren't you? All right, stay with us.
Real life for real families. Hurts, habits, and hang-ups happen in every family.
Jerry and I are here with tools to help you trust God, clean house, and tell the truth to ramp up the joy in your family.
You have what it takes.
It's time to become sober on purpose for His purpose. Hey, this is our 4th episode on codependency, and now we're looking at codependent parents. Some of the research I've been doing, I just want to bring you 8 things that have been relatively consistent in most of the research about codependent parents. These are the characteristics of a codependent parent. If you want to hear the other episodes, this is our 4th episode on codependence, and we talk about what it is and how it looks for us personally. So the codependent parent often, these are the characteristics, has a victim mentality, is never wrong, often is overly emotional, never listens, parrots words and phrases, has extreme mood swings.
What do you mean by that?
Must maintain control and manipulates. And the manipulation is often subtle. It's not often an overt. It could be overt. Often the manipulation is subtle, and it swings from very different things. It can go from the silent treatment to passive aggressive to denial, or to projecting onto the child the feelings that they're having instead of the feelings that the child is having, to the point where the child is confused on what the real feelings are.
Confused on what the real feelings are? I'm giving examples of the characteristics.
And so the child who doesn't know any different from the family of origin is what the child knows from the inside. Most of us don't have a real view of somebody else's family from the inside. So the child is often confused by what all of that means.
Makes sense. Do you know of any examples of this happening in our experiences?
I'm going to put a really funny one in the blog itself on how okay, so to give examples of the 8 different things, victim mentality, what do you think a victim mentality would look like?
Well, the parent who's, saying things like, well, I couldn't do that because I had to take you to your soccer game, and you're costing this family time doing fun things because I'm having to deal with your teachers at school. More specifically, if it was self-centered as opposed to this family, so the victim mentality like that.
Saying, oh, don't worry about it. I don't really need any help. I'll be fine. I take care of everything. Those are all kind of victim mentality.
It was sarcastic, yes.
Even in the reality.
That's more manipulative.
It is pretty manipulative. The next example was never feels that they are wrong.
Or gives if they are to apologize for something, then it's a forced apology or it comes off as insincere.
They can't afford to be wrong because then they're no longer the godlike parent. That it just will tear their ego down, so they have to keep pushing their point, even in facts point to the fact that they're wrong. Overly emotional.
What do you mean by that?
Well, give an example of overly emotional. An overly emotional parent.
The parent who comes home and realizes that dinner hasn't been made, even though the duty's been assigned, and completely breaks down and says how that nothing can get done and everybody's being affected and starts to cry and sob and maybe runs into their room and locks the door and sobs over the fact that dinner wasn't ready on time.
Or they could go the other way. They could get really angry and stomp around. It doesn't have to be this sad little wife person. It can be a very angry, very loud
I was
situation.
doing me. I wasn't doing you. Wow.
Yeah.
That's Freudian. That was a slip.
I'm the loud person too.
Just
Who do you live with? And then never listens.
What?
So that's one of the issues that we've kind of had in our household is a sense that we're always talking over each other and not listening. And that's a real key characteristic of the codependent parent. Again, it's protection of the ego, that if I listen to you, you may actually say something that is either triggering to me or something that I have to acknowledge is you're right about. And if I just don't listen to you, then you don't have a voice and I am not challenged.
I'm not challenged.
Do you have any other examples of that?
I was just leading into parrots, words, and phrases. That was my lead in.
The parrots, words, and phrases, that's the one that interests me the most because I hadn't really thought about that. And I want to read you that one.
Hadn't really thought about that.
I want to read you that one directly. Instead of listening, so this is the codependent parent, parrots, words, and phrases. And this comes from an article I'll link in the show notes. Instead of listening to a child's feelings, a codependent parent will parrot, mirror, or mimic them. If the child claims that the parent is hurting their feelings, for example, the codependent parent will perhaps seconds or even hours later return with, "You're hurting my feelings." Whatever concern the child expresses, the codependent parent will find a way to turn it around and regurgitate it as their own, thus reversing the defensive and offensive roles in the conversation. If called out on this behavior, the codependent parent will ignore it, become angry, or act bewildered and confused. So if the child has a feeling and shares that with the parent, one that upsets the parent will begin to claim it as their own, which totally confuses the child on what their actual feelings are. It will be, "Well, you hurt my feelings," and then the parent will respond with, "You hurt my feelings more." Do you know of an example of that one?
No, I do not.
So an example in our house is if one of us says that we are sick, Jerry is always sicker than we are.
Well, that's true on a number of levels because I do that, but I am also more sick. So there.
So that parenting, I think, is one of the more subtle, more interesting ones that is super confusing for a child who's trying to figure out what they actually feel in their own head. And then the mood swings, examples of the mood swings.
I don't really have any off the top of my head. I've kind of blocked those out as a defense mechanism.
In my mind, it is, you never know what you're coming home to. You don't know if the person is going to be happy, the person is going to be sad. And if you're codependent, it's hard to regulate your feelings around the other person's.
So I thought it amusing in the article how the author refers to the mood swings as the codependent has the ability to alter their mood. And that was an interesting choice of words, I thought. Anyway, that was...
Well, and the other definitions that we've talked about with codependence is a codependent is someone who allows the other person to take them on the ride of however that second person feels. So the codependent doesn't choose to stand on their own and have their own feelings. They go up and down with the feelings of whatever that other person that they're being codependent with. Whatever feelings they're having, they go up and down with them. I can't be happy unless you're happy. If you're angry, then I need to be angry. If you're sad, then I need to be sad. If you're any of those emotions, then my emotions go with you. That's how the codependent happens. When you're a child and you never know what to expect when you're coming home, or when you've been at home and suddenly you've got somebody who's been caretaking for you and it's all been bright and happy and there's a sudden turn, how do you manage that?
Well, you can leave the situation.
Not if you're 3.
Well, then you can't. You just survive.
And that's where they're talking about if you have a codependent parent, you may develop rational responses to irrational behavior, which is one of the things that happens. The 7th one is a codependent must maintain control. And we've talked about this in several different places for the codependent to feel safe, they need to have control of everything. It's the mother who says, you need to look like this. You need to sit at the table like this. You need to eat like this. I need to have total control of you so that I can be okay. Do you have some other examples of that?
No, that's a good example.
And the final one is the manipulations. And again, this is kind of not just out of one article, and I'll list them all in the show notes, a conglomeration of articles of what's happening very subtly. The codependent may look at the child and the child has said, I don't want to watch that movie, or I don't want to play that game, or I don't want to do that. And the codependent says something like, well, nobody ever wants to do anything with me, and I'll just go and do my own thing, and, it's all right. You don't need to take care of me. And then there's all kinds of passive-aggressive ways to do that as well. Do you have an example for that?
Passive-aggressive, the silent treatment.
Yep.
Not doing something that you had agreed to do in an effort to punish. So it's passive, but it's being intentionally hurtful. Do you need to talk more on manipulation?
Do you want to spin that out on the punishment part? If you don't do what I want, then you get you're punished.
Yeah, so
that's a control
punishment can be inaction. You can not act and delve out punishment the same way, and that you can act and do it. So the silent treatment is a way to do it. Well, I know we had agreed that I would take you to wrestling practice or the baseball game, but I'm not going to do that because now something else has come up and it's more important. So it's a form of inaction.
But it's punishment for not doing what I want, or not allowing me to be in control, or you've tripped on my ego, and so I'm going to come after you.
All of these are ways to gain control, right? And they're all in a self-centered manner. It brings me back to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where they talk about how as we start to figure out these character defects, are always based in self-centered behavior.
They are, and a lot of this is also about immaturity. There's no test you have to pass before you have a baby. And maybe there should be. What is the unfinished business of the parents, and what are they passing on to the child who really has no ability to escape from it? And it is such a struggle in that. Yes, I believe we're all doing the best we can, or we're at least attempting to do the best we can. But I've been struggling with that are we dealing with our own stuff so that we can be the adults in the relationship? With us walking into raising a teenager this year, it's very age appropriate for him to do a lot of the teenage things that he is doing. It is not age appropriate for me to behave like a teenager and to stomp around and to go in my room and sulk and to embarrass or withdraw or do those types of things just to get my way. That's at a significant age, that's not appropriate.
So like 47.
No.
Well, this is good. I like this podcast. I like that article a lot. I learned a lot from it, or at least I was able to connect some of the dots and be better armed to articulate this thought pattern. But it still brings me back to bad boundaries or personal boundaries. Well, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then if we can't maintain it, then we resort back to codependency. It also, and of course you have to be somewhat self-aware to even start to draw some of those boundaries. The other thing is I think, it's pretty easy to say that everyone I've ever met in my life, to some extent, has some of these characteristics from time to time, if not all of them.
And I think that's what we talked about in episode 15 of everybody's on the spectrum. Everybody's on the spectrum of counter and codependent. Everybody's not always on one end or the other, but we do some things that lead either direction. The question is, are you aware of how your interactions are affecting your children? Are you aware that when you do some of these things, when you manipulate, when you're never wrong, when you don't let them disagree with you, be angry, all those types of things, then it leads to this non-understanding of feelings, just like numbing out for alcoholics leads to a non-understanding of feelings.
I suggest you say, when I don't do this, when I manipulate, when I, as opposed to when you, just because it's puts our audience less on the defensive when we say in the first person.
I think you're right. When I do those things. So we do have some suggestions for you. And this is from another article. And this is where I think parents can really beef it up. We all make mistakes. We've all done things on this scale which we've regretted. One of the things that I think is really important is when you recognize.
When you recognize.
When I recognize it, or when anybody recognizes it.
No.
I don't agree completely.
It's better to say when anybody, or when we, and we should, for matters
when
of
recognition happens,
okay,
in my life or anybody's life, there are a couple great things that you can do. One of which would be to go back and apologize and say these and take credit for your feelings. I would take credit for my feelings and say, I was feeling grumpy or tired.
Take responsibility, right?
Take responsibility or credit for my feelings. I was feeling grumpy or tired. I should not have treated you that way. That was the wrong thing to do. Now, if you do that over and over and over and over, the child is going to lose trust.
And what can I do to make this better?
The other thing is to teach children, and we try really hard with ours to teach them that their value is not in their performance. Their value is not in what they do. That they are valuable whether they please you or not. They are valuable whether they get good grades or not. They are a divine creature created by God and something that is beyond worth. Whether they do exactly what they're told, don't do what they're told, run amok, they are still valuable human beings. Being mindful and giving them the opportunity to speak out even when it makes you uncomfortable. Encourage positive self-talk. That's one thing that I think is a big struggle, especially if the parent has trouble with positive self-talk. And one of the things I did when they were little was one of the books that suggested that I praise myself out loud to them so that I could help them learn to praise themselves. And so when they were about, 2, 4, 6, somewhere in there, I would say, "Oh, Mommy, you did a great job. Oh, Mommy, you did this. Mommy, you're doing such a good job." And parents can praise each other. It's one of the things that we need to model between parents on praising each other and telling each other how good a job.
Yeah, by the way, I think you're doing an excellent job on this podcast. I think it's really turning out well. And the edit work that you're going to do after this is all over is going to be exceptional.
The audience doesn't even understand what the edit work is like. As you're looking at these things, so in modeling your own behavior, the other key in modeling your own behavior, can you guess?
No.
I bet you can. What's always important for anybody in taking care of themselves?
I don't know where you're going with this.
Your own self-care, working your own program, and not trying to work somebody else's program for them. So you mean
my own self-care, working my own program. You don't mean you, right? You mean me.
No, I'm pointing at you because you're frustrating me.
I don't need to work my own program. My wife does it for me.
And that's part of the codependency triggers is, does the other parent, do the members in the family have the right to express their own opinions, have the right to be angry? Even the Bible says it is okay to be angry.
But not to go to bed with it.
Don't let the sun go down on your anger.
That's right.
We could get into a theological discussion later.
Check out our theological dogmatic podcast that we're going to be launching.
The main crux of it is all of us in a family unit have responsibility. I have responsibility. You have responsibility. As the child comes of age, they have responsibility. In the beginning, the child doesn't have the ability. They just grow up in the environment they're in. So what kind of cradled environment are you offering them?
You asking me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm offering, from cradle to college, Pop-Tarts and movies night. That's what I'm offering.
So Khalil Gibran gave us this great poem, and I think we'll just kind of wrap up with this one. And he was a philosopher, and his poem says, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not for you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hands be for happiness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, he loves the bow that is stable." And that just strikes me as something that we all strive for, is to offer our children ourselves in stability, not in craziness. Hey, we've been dealing with a lot of heavy stuff with codependency. If you saw yourself as a codependent parent, there's a lot of good work on how to work through your issues to be able to parent in a stable and solid way, especially over at Codependence Anonymous. There's a lot of things over there. There is always hope. You can always trust God, clean house, and tell the truth. Where can they find some more hope?
Sober on Purpose podcast, the Joyous Family Facebook page. I think that's it. Am I missing anything?
TheJoyousFamily.com. All of it centers around that webpage of TheJoyousFamily.com. So we look forward to hearing from you. We'd love your reviews on iTunes. We're coming towards the end of first quarter, and we're still looking for more. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.